Good morning. It is Wednesday, August 26th, 2020. This is the Future History Podcast. It's another day in the neighborhood.
Hello.
How you doing today, sir?
All right. A little interesting tidbit for this day in history. 1939, which I found a little odd, but because of the time, the first baseball game between the Brooklyn Dodgers and the Cincinnati Reds was televised. 1939. Well, first thing I found interesting was, from 1939, there couldn't have been many TVs in the country at that time. So
Definitely.
to give you a little idea of the amount of people that were actually going to be able to watch the game, you only had about 400 TVs in the greater New York area. So, like you had pointed out before when we were discussing it, that, all the wealthier people that were able to purchase a piece of equipment like that.
Right, it was the Millionaires Club.
Yeah, and actually, the reason that that came to be and why they actually broadcast that game, 1939, the World's Fair was held in New York, and they thought that it would be the perfect catalyst to, the doubleheader between the Brooklyn Dodgers and the Cincinnati Reds would be the perfect catalyst to showcase this new technology that later became the television and really didn't become popular in American homes and affordable for middle America until the 1950s, the mid-50s. But the first televised ball game was 1939.
It's amazing. Speaking of 1939, during the Great Depression, they had a lot of sports to go after and to keep them occupied, to keep the people occupied.
Yeah,
and it's amazing. Now you can't even fill the stands.
Yeah, they were crawling out of at that point, they were crawling out of the Great Depression. But yeah, that was one of the, times in American history that sports played a big role.
In the morale.
Yeah, keeping people, and it did even up till recent history after 9/11, sports played a role, especially baseball, played a role in the, the overall morale in the country. And people still talk about it till this day. When you listen to the sports radio stations, and they'll talk about there's a particular home run hit by Mike Piazza on the Mets, and the Yankees were in the World Series, I believe,
Subway
that year.
Series.
That was the year after the Subway Series, but 2001 was the year. I believe it was the Yankees and the Marlins, but it was the Yankees lost the World Series, but it was a classic series, and
I remember watching that time.
Sorry, it was the Diamondbacks, I believe, not the Marlins. But go ahead.
That's cool.
Yep.
I remember watching when Piazza's bat broke at Clemens.
Yeah,
and Clemens just wasn't having it.
That was.
I think Roger Clemens is my favorite baseball player, of all time, because he was just such a rebel.
Yeah.
He did not. He seemed like he was just this wild guy that they would have to lock in the cage after he was done.
Clemens had an interesting career because. I remember him when I was in baseball camp as a younger guy. I was in probably elementary school, and it was 1985. And Clemens, I remember hearing, so one of the kids said, or it was around 1985. Roger Clemens just struck out 20 people in the game, which is a record. There's been, it's happened again, but nobody's eclipsed 20 strikeouts in the game. And so he was a young, he was just throwing heat, gas. And he, really good pitcher, Cy Young winner as a young guy on the Red Sox. And then his career started to just hit like a rough spot. Traded over to the Blue Jays, and he resurrected his career, winning multiple Cy Youngs. Then came to the Yankees, and his career just continued to flourish. But the argument with him was always, performance-enhancing drugs. But I will say this for him. Whether I do think he benefited from them, as did 90% of baseball in those days, and anybody in the fitness industry can tell you when looking at the baseball players from that era, everybody was jacked up on something. So, but Clemens, his workouts and his preparation were notorious in those days. He worked out like a power lifter, and just.
I think
really,
you told me he would have a bucket of sand, right? And he would
rice. Yeah, he would have a
rice.
big bucket of rice, and he would just continuously plunge his arm into it as deep down as he could go. Just
imagine taking a hook from him.
Yeah, just to build up his shoulder. But he was a tough Texas guy, and as far as my generation, I mean, he was when he pitched, he was almost like a Bob Gibson from the old, from older times, where Clemens, he owned the plate. If you were leaning in over that plate,
he was
coming up and in at you and letting you know, I own, that plate's mine. Don't take any.
That's the signature of a great pitcher. Right
yeah. It was always intimidation when he pitched. I mean, when he was on the mound.
So you think when the batters were walking up, they were kind of like
absolutely
thinking a little bit?
Absolutely.
That's
the thing is with Clemens was that
to have that kind of power.
Randy Johnson was another one like that from this era. I mean, you had Nolan Ryan was absolutely that way from past eras. You had Bob Gibson. There's been pitchers throughout history.
What was Randy Johnson's pitching specialty? What was his?
Well, it was a fastball, but his real specialty was being almost 7 feet tall.
Right. He was
then
huge.
Standing on the mound.
Right. He's almost 8 feet tall.
Right, and the thing was, early in his career, he was extremely wild. So you're coming up to bat against this guy throwing 100 miles an hour.
Sure.
And plus by the time the ball gets released, he's about halfway to the plate because he's so long. So batters were really,
That's true. It takes away from your reaction time every inch.
Absolutely. And like I said, not only is he almost 7 feet tall, but he's standing on a mound.
Right.
So it's like you're looking up at this guy.
Some monster, like octopus.
And his arm is coming right at you, throwing almost 100 miles an hour.
Isn't he the guy who threw the ball and it
hit
the bird?
Yeah.
What are the that's got to be like a 1 in a billion.
It was a miracle that it was crazy.
I wonder what went through his head when that happened, when he saw that puff.
I don't know.
That guy, Randy Johnson was a savage.
Yeah.
He really was.
Yeah. He was very wild, like I said. The thing with him when he came up was, he had the long mullet.
Yeah.
He was he kind of looked like an ostrich almost. And he was very, just angry-looking guy.
Where did he come from?
He's an American. I don't know where in America he came from. Not sure. But when he first came up, I believe it was on the Montreal Expos. And he was very he had the stuff to be a major league pitcher, but he was very wild. And all the...
Just to say, he's from Walnut Creek, California.
Okay, Walnut Creek, California. So, yep. But his first team was the Montreal Expos, and he gradually was able to harness his stuff, and he wasn't wild anymore. But again, he was another pitcher from my generation that I remember being very intimidated. But Clemens was when he was on the mound,
something else.
And you could see it when you watched his games, his whole disposition on the mound and and the way even he threw the ball just looked different coming out of his hand. I mean, he had a lot of pop, and he
something about baseball. I try to get interested in it.
Yeah.
I have trouble finding it interesting now. When I was a little younger, and those we had Derek Jeter,
sure,
we had Gary Sheffield,
during
we
the
had
Yankees,
all these legends. To me, that's I'll always remember those guys.
Well,
and nowadays, I don't
to the parade that year. I forgot what year. I think it was.
It was before 9/11.
Yeah, because we were right by the Twin Towers. We were right across the
pictures.
street.
It's amazing because you actually are looking up at the Twin Towers.
Yeah,
there we were.
Yep. I think it was 99. I don't remember. But we went to the parade that year.
That was what a scene that
Clemens was on the team then. We saw Clemens, Jeter, all the
gentlemen.
Yeah. Bernie Williams, all those guys. But it was
Bernie Williams. Thank you for mentioning him. He's a great musician, by the way.
Very good. His career took off, being playing classic
music.
Yeah,
straight up. I think he does a little jazz too. Right?
Yeah, he's into
but it's
jazz.
more like a rhythm and blues based.
Very
jazz.
good though. Very good. His career, he's really found a second career. But he, like I said, Clemens was my. There's a lot of people that dislike him because he's one of those guys you either loved him or you hated him.
Yeah, it's like a villain almost.
I liked him. I mean, he was always my favorite pitcher. And again, he worked hard.
Sorry.
No, go.
I remember he went away to the Astros, and that was a pretty sad moment. And I remember we were all thinking, it's probably done. He's never going to come back. And then he came back to the Yankees for a year or two, and he didn't do bad.
Joe Torre has a book that he wrote about his years with the Yankees, and he mentioned a little bit about all the players, and you kind of got more of a feel for what went on with each player.
Right.
The Clemens part was pretty interesting. You talk about a guy that really was took the game personally, and if he had just a lot of little. It's a great read if anybody's into baseball and hasn't read it.
Book?
Yeah, about the years that he managed the Yankees, but. the Clemens, you get an idea of how hard he trained, and how personally he took the game. It was just very interesting, but definitely an intimidator. And Nolan Ryan, he kind of patterned himself after another big Texan, pardon me, Nolan Ryan. And Nolan Ryan was another one who, was just through heat. The guy was in his 50s, and he went on a sports show, and he was still hitting 90 miles an hour or over.
Do you think there's something in the water in Texas, maybe?
Everything's bigger in Texas.
That's what they say.
But Nolan Ryan was, one of those guys that just an intimidator when he was on the mound. And he also, was able to keep his career going for a long period of time. He was just a genetic freak, And I remember actually Robin Ventura was much younger, probably 15, 20 years younger at the time than Nolan Ryan, charged the mound at Ryan. And Ryan beat
That's my favorite. When
he charged the mound, and it was like he was a lot younger. I mean, they were from, Nolan Ryan was nearing the end of his career. Ventura was just, he was a lot younger, and it was Ryan just slammed him. It was not even close. He beat the hell out of him.
I know we don't have to mention the Pedro Martinez, Don Zimmer.
Yeah, that was another great pitcher from that era, Pedro Martinez, though. Yeah. He was phenomenal. And
Curt Schilling.
Well, the year that the Yankees lost,
sports was in a really good place at that point. I feel like.
Yeah. Well, really, the issue that the Yankees had when they played against the Diamondbacks and lost the World Series was that Clemens, Johnson, Randy Johnson was on the Diamondbacks at that time. Schilling and Johnson just kept rolling them out against the Yankees, and if they weren't starting, then they were relieving.
Right.
And the Yankees couldn't, in a series, Yankees just had no answer for it. Right. And that's why they lost the series.
Isn't it amazing? It's all like a game of chess, sports. Yeah. Like no matter what.
Schilling was a good big game pitcher. Very difficult guy to root for.
What was that when he was bleeding?
Yeah, he had some type of injury, and they kind of bandaged him up, but he, the blood, you were able to see it on his sock, and he pitched through the game, and,
that's what
some people say he played it up, some people don't, but he was legitimately injured. But he was a great big game pitcher. He's one of those guys. He's very opinionated, and he has a lot of.
Who's this?
Curt Schilling speaks his mind, and he's taken a lot of heat for it through the years, and he gets a lot of hate from people across the board. But if I wanted to pick a guy to pitch a big game for me, he'd be in the mix as far as who I'd pick. He was great.
Another honorable mention, and maybe more than an honorable mention, is the great Mariano Rivera.
Yeah, well, that was he was a reliever, but he would be the guy.
You need a good reliever.
I would absolutely. He was big game pitcher, and Pedro, I don't want to make this all about baseball, but Pedro's got to be. You brought him up; he has to be spoken about. The guy was phenomenal for two reasons that I felt. Number one, he was very slight. Like when you see the guys throwing fastballs like a Clemens or a Randy Johnson, they're bigger guys. Pedro was a very slight guy, and he would throw gas.
Right.
But what made Pedro really good was that his changeup was just devastating. So you'd be gearing up for a fastball, he would lay in a changeup, and he was just able to lay it in there. He would buckle their knees. I mean, he would break ankles in the batter's box.
Do you keep up with Marcus Stroman?
I see his father.
Because he's another guy. He's not like
not a bigger guy, but he's husky though. That's the thing. Yeah, Pedro Martinez was like a wisp of a guy.
Back in high school, he was the man.
Yeah, he was a great pitcher. Though. Yep.
There's
he's injured right now. He's out for the season.
Oh yeah.
I think he opted out for COVID, but he.
I guess I wonder how many people did that. I wonder how many people opted out.
There are some. I mean, it's not widespread, but there are some guys. But he came to the Mets, and really they've gotten nothing for him so far. So I mean, he's got a lot of potential. I mean, the guy is a great pitcher, but he just hasn't been able to really. He had like one good season.
He's getting old too.
Yeah, he is. He's right in his prime right now, actually, where he should be. Should be building his resume up, but
what are you going to do?
Injuries are a part of the sport, especially when you're a power pitcher.
And you're not 6 foot 11.
I mean, he's got a lot.
Like my height.
Right, he's got a lot of of things, stacked up against him. But that was what made Pedro Martinez so great, was that the stuff he had did not match his body type,
right?
And he maintained it for a long. He's a surefire Hall of Famer, But he was a guy. He wasn't afraid to go inside either. He was.
He was a savage.
Phenomenal. Could be in the argument for best pitcher of this generation.
Pedro Martinez.
Pedro.
Really?
Pedro, Roger Clemens, Greg Maddux. There's a few others. You have a guy like Roy Halladay, rest in peace, but his career just wasn't long enough, to match up with those other guys. But there were guys that you could say the best of the generation. But absolutely, Pedro would be in the argument.
Do you think that Derek Jeter will be remembered sort of like a Yogi Berra type of guy, almost like in let's say 50, 60 years?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, his career was first of all in the time of media. He was lucky earlier in his career because it was right before cell phones and everybody was taking pictures. I remember there was a girl who was in the gym. I mean, we were all young at the time, and she used to tell us that a bar that she worked at in the city, or as a club, Jeter would come in, and we were all Yankee fans or whatever, and she just the stories that she used to tell us, pretty I mean, everybody's familiar with his story. He really had a good life as a young bachelor in the city, money wise. He lived guy. In a beautiful penthouse, but he was able to keep his image very clean.
Oh yeah.
And when you look at his parents, he was raised by two very good. I mean, his parents were excellent.
See, he was a hero for a young kid.
Mm-hmm.
He was a role model.
Yeah.
Then you get these people like Alex Rodriguez, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, I mean,
Alex Rodriguez, I wouldn't consider him to be like a role model type of figure.
No, he was almost like, he really never did anything that was like terrible, but it was like he was just doomed.
Trouble.
Yeah, he was just doomed to play the villain to Jeter.
He was sick though at one point.
He was physical tools. A-Rod trumps Jeter any day.
But Jeter is very
But Jeter was
multi-purpose.
much more clutch.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Jeter did more with what he had than A-Rod did.
Correct.
But when you look at sheer numbers and everything else, but again, you had the performance, and that was a tough era in baseball, because I think when you look at Jeter, you can rest assured he didn't do any performance-enhancing drugs. We all know that A-Rod did, so who knows how many of the home runs can be attributed to that. But Truth be told, physical tools, A-Rod was tough to compete with. He really was.
Big man.
And his, he really never did anything that would. It wasn't really like he did anything bad. He just wasn't. The reason him and Jeter had this fallout, apparently there was a magazine.
I didn't know this. I didn't know they had a falling out.
Well, they did before A-Rod came to the Yankees. They used to be best friends.
Okay.
And A-Rod was a young shortstop on the Mariners. Jeter was a young shortstop on the Yankees. Then A-Rod came over to the Texas Rangers, signed that monstrous contract at the time, $200 and some odd million.
Ooh.
And
Still
what happened
monstrous.
was, a reporter asked A-Rod at the time, he was asking him what he thought about Jeter and just questions about Jeter. And A-Rod, after his responses, basically said, when we prepare to play against the Yankees, Jeter's not the guy we worry about beating us.
Right.
It's the other guys, and he's really benefited from the other guys on the team. And because of that, anybody who was in Jeter's inner circle would tell people, once you kind of you did something to kind of push him a little bit, you never got back into his inner circle.
Once you violated his trust,
that was it. And I guess that was also why he was able to maintain a squeaky clean image.
I think he's brilliant.
So A-Rod they eventually, A-Rod came over to the Yankees, and you got to say, kudos to A-Rod, because when he came to the Yankees, he and Jeter were both shortstops. A-Rod agreed to trade positions and play third base.
Right.
And he was an excellent third baseman. So, sometimes A-Rod...
I got to tell you, I miss those days.
Yeah,
I really do.
Well, some of the things with A-Rod get overlooked, because he did do that selflessly. But they did become,
They were social.
They were amicable, but it was never the way it was before.
Gotcha.
Because of that interview. And Jeter just never forgot it. So, Yeah. So
see, now that's cool.
Yeah,
I never knew that.
So that's where those two were at. That was the story with those two. And, you know, and the press played it up like, even when A-Rod and Jeter buried it and just said, look, we're all good.
Well, what's the press for
They just
anyway?
kept hammering away at it. And then when, you know, A-Rod's first spring training with the Yankees, that was it. That was the only story was how Jeter would deal with A-Rod on the team and vice versa. And, you know, did you guys bury the hatchet? And, you know, in typical Jeter fashion, he gave him nothing, you know.
Genius.
Yeah, so...
I think he will certainly have a legacy that carries on.
Yeah, I mean, he was the Yankee captain, his career also. You know, every time something occurred...
Never heard him get political once.
No, he just like Michael Jordan. Certain athletes, just, that's not their thing.
I got to say, Michael Jordan never ceases to impress me. Like, I know that he's got all the money in the world, but when you see this guy go tuna fishing...
Yeah.
He comes back with like $1 million tuna.
He's just
you could sell
competitive.
That tuna to Japan.
He's super competitive.
If I had money, that's what I'd be doing.
When he does things, he does, you know, even his cigars, he smokes a good cigar. Like,
right, everything is good.
Yeah, he does things right.
I wonder what his net worth is. I'm going to look that one up. Are you curious?
I'd have to say it's got to be bottom line minimum. I would say $500 million.
Let's see.
I think it's probably more than that, but
you're going to say like 500 mil?
Yeah, give
1.6 billion.
Yeah, man.
Woo, as of 2020.
I mean, he's a part owner of a basketball team.
He's got his own shoes that everyone and their mother wears.
The shoes are just, I remember.
I can't believe that he actually owns them.
Yeah, I remember the first Jordans when they came out. And, I mean, you know, there was only a few. That was like when high tops really, like you had the Chuck Taylors and stuff, but high top basketball shoes really didn't become big till the Air Jordans. And I remember it in elementary school. I remember kids started getting the Air Jordans and the knockoff Jordans and stuff.
I see that they're making a new Space Jam.
Yeah, with LeBron though, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm really going to enjoy it. But
I'm not a LeBron guy. I don't dislike him. I mean, he's never really done anything that, you know, but he's not just, you know, I'm
not a fan.
Not a fan, but you know, great talent in the argument for best player of all time. You know, to me, Jordan was, but you know, but you know, Jordan was just, you know, there were certain people that transcended the sport. Jeter absolutely transcended baseball.
Not to mention, Michael Jordan also played baseball.
Yeah, he did.
You don't see that too often.
He did. And there's questions as to why. Was the you know, he was the NBA trying to get him out just to let the gambling issues he had settle. You know, there were reasons that people think he, you know, took the sojourn to baseball.
I wonder when you have that much money what a gambling issue entails.
Oh well,
how much money a day, you know?
He plays high stakes, you know, but
everything he does is
like
high
he
stakes.
said, it's never really dented him as far as you know.
He's squeaky clean as far as I'm concerned. I've never heard a bad word about the guy.
You know, Jeter transcended baseball and all. You know, when you see most players come up of the next generation and they all point to, you know, that's the guy that I want to be. That's the guy, you know. Yeah. There was another guy that was a good shortstop for a while, Troy Tulowitzki, that came up, and every time they interviewed him, I remember, you know, Jeter, you know, he just so for a generation of young baseball players, that was the guy that they looked up to. So yeah, I think he will be looked back on as one of those, you know,
Yogi Berra figures.
Yeah. As will Mariano.
So we were talking about this day in history, obviously, with the first televised game over at Ebbets Field. And you said it was in Brooklyn. I wonder in Brooklyn what that location is now. Is it like, is there any
I'm not sure. It's not a baseball stadium anymore, obviously. I don't know. But you know what I found interesting was a lot of those players in Brooklyn, you know, back in those days, you weren't making, you know, baseball players, unless you were like a Babe Ruth, which, you know, this is a little later than Ruth, but unless you were like the top player in the league or top 3 or 4 players in the league, you know, you weren't making enough money to live on year round. So a lot of these players, you know, would work like, regular, work in a grocery store in the off season or whatever, and they would take the train to the games with a lot of the people. And you know, people are
different.
I talked to older fans, and they're like, "Yeah, I remember I used to take the train to see the Dodgers in Brooklyn, and you'd see like some of the players were on the train with them. Yeah, it's like." different times. Now there's this like gap between the athlete and back then they were a part of the, and that's what made the Brooklyn Dodgers a lovable team too, was that they were really like entrenched in the neighborhood, You got to think, you had the New York Giants,
as a baseball
Brooklyn
team?
Dodgers, the Yankees.
Wow.
Well, that's where the Mets got their colors. The Mets colors are the Brooklyn Dodgers blue and the orange from the New York Giants. They combined those two colors. Yeah. Because if you look at the New York Giants became the San Francisco Giant baseball team, and Brooklyn became the LA Dodgers. So those two teams brought baseball to California.
How are the Mets doing these days? I don't really keep
I'm not
up
a Mets fan, but they're not doing well.
Yeah.
No.
That's been the case for a long time, right?
I think until they get new ownership in there, and I don't even look, it's like they've spent money on some players. I just, for whatever the reason, they just doesn't break right for that team. I don't know, it's.
Do you think they're ever going to run into a struggle where they might cease to exist as a baseball team?
Well, I think now they have new ownership coming in, so I don't think that's going to be an issue for a while. I just think the market's too big.
I would hate to see that.
The market is too big. There's just too many fans. New York can absolutely support two baseball teams, and I don't think
for now.
Right. Well, but back in the day you had 3, 4. I don't know if there was ever 4 teams at one. You had the Brooklyn Dodgers, the Giants, and then the Yankees. There was 3. I don't know.
So the Dodgers went to
Los Angeles. And the New York Giants.
I wonder why. Like, what?
I don't know.
Was a business deal.
I think that was,
they were like, that was all the...
I think that was probably also, baseball was probably trying to get teams over to the other coast. So,
take a well-known team.
They definitely weren't as popular as the Yankees were in New York. So, New York had 3 teams, and I guess that was the move was to take 2 of the 3, and then they formed the Mets.
Some of the earliest stories I remember is how many hot dogs Babe Ruth could eat.
Yeah.
Like, in the middle of a game.
Babe Ruth was like in many aspects, larger than life character.
Yeah.
It really was.
He'd be smoking a cigar eating like a dozen dogs.
Yep. Well, he was an orphan.
He loved ladies.
Did you know?
I did not know.
Yeah, he grew up in an orphanage. Part American Indian.
No kidding.
Yeah. Babe Ruth's story is pretty. He's got an interesting story, and he was just one of the. See, baseball. When
I love his name.
Such
an old school.
George
like
Herman.
1920s.
Yeah, George Herman Ruth, Babe Ruth, like classic. The reason Ruth also became popular was baseball in those days. The Ty Cobb was like the big player before Babe Ruth, like one of the biggest. But he was like a singles hitter, a doubles hitter. So you'd have teams that would end up with like 10 home runs for the whole team for the season. Then you had Babe Ruth coming up hitting 50 home runs.
Right. He was.
Imagine. Right. So baseball went from being a small ball game to being a guy that
slugging.
He revolutionized baseball.
He like brought it into the modern era.
Yes. Plus, when he first came up, he was a pitcher.
Right.
So.
And he was on Boston.
And
which is unbelievable. And then now there's this curse, right?
Yeah.
Like the big Boston curse.
Apparently the curse of the Bambino, when he was traded to the Yankees, Boston never won again. And they say it was, Babe Ruth cursed Boston. And they've won since then. But
I guess that's that Native American.
curse of the Bambino, yep. But Babe
was he part Italian as well? Why they call him Bambino?
Oh, I don't know. That was just like a name, I think, in those days for like... a
young guy.
Yeah, big, husky guy. But I don't think he was Italian. They called him the Sultan of SWAT, Big Bambino. Babe was a nickname, obviously. But he, very interesting character. One of the true when you think of America, you think of certain people, and Babe Ruth certainly,
definitely one of them.
One of the biggest sports icons. Muhammad Ali, Babe Ruth,
Mike Tyson.
Yeah, he's big. He's not quite at those. These guys are like icons, But But Babe Ruth was certainly, like I said though, he was big not only in sheer size, but his game was big, hitting home runs, not just hitting singles, So
wouldn't he hold like 8 bats in his hand to warm up?
Yeah, he would warm up with a couple of bats. He
was a showman.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was a true showman. And they have a lot of like folklore was built around him. Like when he pointed to where he was going to hit a home run, and he told the kid that was in a hospital, "I'm going to hit a home run for you today," and he did. The accuracy of these stories over time, nobody's really sure how accurate they were, but they become etched in stone throughout history, and that's
as is in so many things, right?
Yeah, so part of his his career was just one that, like, I mean, you talk about a guy that was just interesting. And baseball in those days, like I said, you didn't have California baseball, so it was an
East Coast division.
Coast, slightly into the mid part of the country, but baseball was Northeast big time, and it was just that was when it was America's game,
right?
So, but that was the story of Babe. Another Yankee. When you think of the Yankees throughout history, you had the Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig era. Then you had the DiMaggio era. Then you had the Mickey Mantle, Yogi Berra era. Then the Reggie Jackson era. Then the 90s dynasty with Jeter, Rivera.
Pack of sickos.
It's like there's no other sports team that rivals the Yankees in American sports. There's just not. As far as history, there's just not.
I wonder what that is. I'm sure it has to do with good business decision, but I think there's like a spirit when you're at, like, back in like those days. Like, you go to Yankee
New York
Stadium,
was the place to be back then.
Crazy.
I mean, obviously, if you're a baseball player, now things have become decentralized where you don't have to be in New York, but
definitely.
New York was the place to be. And that was, as a player, you want, even still to this day, like Garrett Cole grew up a Yankee fan, wanted to come to the Yankees to play, and
it's a dream for millions of people.
That's why they've always had the money because of the revenue from being in New York. There's just New York for whatever but for some reason the Mets just don't. Because the Yankees are much older, the Mets just don't have that.
It's interesting though. The
history.
Mets have like a real cult following though.
Yes, they do. Just like the Jets and Giants, it's
right.
very similar. Or the Rangers, Islanders.
Sure.
The Islanders, the Mets, the Jets are like the young upstarts. The Giants, the Rangers, and the Yankees are the teams that have been around throughout history. And, it's weird because I'm an Islander fan, not because I really got into hockey when I moved to Long Island in 1980, and my father put up a poster on my wall. And it was Mike Bossy, Dennis Potvin, Brian Trottier, Billy Smith, right when the Islanders won their first cup.
Sure.
And then for the next
4 years,
they won the cup.
Right.
And, they won a total of 4 in a row, and then they reached the 5th Stanley Cup and lost. So they had potential to win 5 in a row.
So I guess it would have been for the next 3 years then.
Yeah, it was the next. They won 80, 81, 82, and 83. And then they made it in 84 and lost.
I can't imagine what a hockey game would have been like to attend in
I'll
82.
tell you what it was like. It was crazy. I used to go, my father would take me to, did some work, I think, with Billy Smith at the time through his business. And he would take me to see the Islander games. And Nassau Coliseum was pumping back then. I mean, It was sold out. It was
different world.
Especially for a kid seeing it. But the Islanders were just so good in those days. It was like in elementary school, I was a teacher in the late 90s, early 2000s, and all the kids had Yankee shirts on. When I went to school, in elementary school, all the kids had Islander shirts on.
It was the team
that
to
was
love.
the team to love then. So, a lot of things have to do with when you grow up.
I can't for the life of me figure out what, like, Nassau Coliseum, what's going on with it.
Well, it's
always in this like constant state of shifting ownership.
Well, what they're doing is now it's supposed to house, some concerts and some smaller events. It does until the Belmont, arena's built, whatever they're going to call it for the Islanders. The Islanders will play games at the Coliseum, but it's just like Shea. They were like at the time they were built to almost look modern, and then when you build sometimes to look modern, it becomes very dated.
Yeah.
Whereas like a Yankee Stadium.
Oh, but Shea, man.
Yeah, well, Shea was a great.
I consider myself so lucky.
Yeah.
I don't know if like.
I like seeing games at Shea. I was a Yankee fan, but I went to Shea a lot.
Dirty.
And
it felt so.
Yeah, it was like Queens, being in Queens.
It was it was like standing in the middle of a street in Queens.
And a lot of Mets fans say that.
That.
There's always a there's
Citi
always
Field is very like it's brick and it's very like nice and
it just
Shea was a real
Shea and the Nassau Coliseum reminded me of each other because there was nothing that real like the Yankee Stadium had the original Yankee Stadium had those white facades going around like
today, right? They didn't do that.
Yeah, and there was something though that like when you saw the stadium, you knew with Shea. There was just, they had the apple that went up when you hit the home run. But, like, there was nothing really notable about the stadium. It was just very, like, just a circular. It was play ball. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. And the same thing with the Coliseum. When you go to the Nassau Coliseum, it was literally just a circular arena stuck in the middle of a parking lot, But what was interesting about the Coliseum, the Islanders were, like, one of, if not the only, like, suburban team.
Right.
Like, a lot of hockey teams are based in the middle of a city. Like, you're not going to have a tailgating party going to a Ranger game.
Right.
But when you go to the Islander games, the parking lots would fill up with all the fans and people could tailgate.
That's a great point you just made. I never thought of that.
Yeah. And that's
you can't tailgate in Manhattan.
Right. But that's the thing. That was why the
You just go out to the pubs, though, and get smashed.
Yeah, well, that's the difference. Like, when you're going to the city, boom, you could take the train right into Madison Square Garden. But when you go to see the Islanders, you're parking in the park. It's like an experience for the day.
It's like going to a concert.
Yeah. It's a different experience. So I always enjoyed that about the Islanders.
No, that's a great point.
Yeah,
I never really.
Yeah, that
never crossed my mind.
One of the cool things about the Islanders, and the Mets when they'd go down the Rangers rather if they win a Stanley Cup.
Well, that's always the difference too between the city and the island. We got a little more space.
Yeah,
we got a little more.
Well, the Rangers went down the Canyon of Heroes when they won the Stanley Cup. For their ticker tape parade, the Islanders went around like Hempstead Boulevard,
really?
Hempstead Turnpike. Yeah, that's a difference. But the
hockey's a hell of a sport.
It is. It's just a great sport.
I'm going to tell you a quick funny little tidbit about me ice skating last winter.
Okay.
I hadn't gone skating in maybe, I want to say over 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was going out with friends. I'm like, I can skate.
Right.
There, I get on the ice. I almost fell on my ass like the second I got out there. There's these little 3-year-olds going
I know,
past me. I'm like, what the hell?
I can't
And like
skate.
they're like, watch out, old man.
Yeah.
It was so funny.
Yeah, kids are like rockets out there. Skating,
my God, they fly.
I played deck hockey for many years, but I couldn't skate.
We had a team called the Sickos, everybody.
Yeah.
We had a deck hockey team where we were like short by 20 players.
Yeah.
We had to play, there was no switching, by the way. We were just stuck in the game all 4 quarters, right?
Three
quarters, rather,
yeah.
Periods, and 3 periods. And by the end of it, we were beat up. I don't think we ever...
Oh,
because all the other teams had like 30 people that they were
and I
switching
think,
constantly.
a lot of what happened, like when I was younger and played, it was, I played on a team that every year they played, so you get used to playing and you're in game shape to play, and, the team works together. When you just throw a bunch of young guys and old guys together that haven't played, you just like, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. But I played
remember though in the old house we'd always be out there. We'd be playing some hockey.
Yeah,
we got the net. Those were good days.
Yeah,
hockey's
a great sport though. I always, and I feel fortunate too. Like I said, coming out to Long Island in 1980.
Yeah.
And the Islanders winning those Stanley Cups. It was like just everybody was into hockey. The back in Newsday, I remember. I think it was the '83 Cup. That they had this color picture of all the Islanders, and some stores that you go into, the owner the deli by where we used to live had it up. It was just a shot of all the Islanders, and you could get like a color poster, and it was just a good time to be on Long Island in those days. There was,
Well, they better get their ass in
They're
gear.
looking good now, though. Yeah. They are, they're looking good.
I love
Game
hockey.
2 is
I think
today.
hockey and baseball, by far, aside from like UFC boxing, is my favorite sports. I was never really a big fan of football. I got to be honest.
Yep.
I was never a big fan of basketball. Ever, even as a little child.
I love football, and the problem is though, I am doomed as a Jets fan.
Right.
That's like that is being a Jets fan is like my punishment for being a Yankee fan. I feel.
Sure. Yeah.
Because the Yankees are, when I was young though, the Yankees were not. When I was really young, they were good in the '70s. The '80s Yankees, like the mid to late '80s and early '90s Yankees, were not so good.
Oh,
no,
really?
they weren't good.
Gotcha.
They got really good in the mid '90s. They were just they were never like I think they had one year that they were in last place, but they were always like hovering around, but they didn't really make the playoffs most of the years, you know. But the Jets are just, I'm like doomed, you know, and it seems like it just every year it gets worse and worse. Yeah. So, you know, but that's a team, they haven't won the Super Bowl since 1969. So in my lifetime, I've never seen them win a Super Bowl.
What do you think now about these concussion rules for kids' sports?
I think, you know, first of all, I think that it's not like these are, you know, yes, players in the NFL are bigger and faster than they were in the past, so you're going to have more violent collisions. But with that being said, in recent years, protection has gotten better.
Right.
So I think everything is relative, and I think there was just as many concussions back then, just that now it's just detectable much easier, and there's more rules in place. So I don't think this is a new thing, but when you see some of these old players and they don't have their marbles, it's you know,
sad.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, more for kids, like.
But for kids, I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
A lot of parents are like,
yeah, a lot of guys that played in the NFL won't let their kids play football. So,
well, it's like Mike Tyson. He's talking to his son, and he's cracking up. He's like, "You want to fight?"
Yeah.
He's like, "You got to come from that.
Yeah, right.
You got to be born a fighter. You don't just like think you're going to train and become a slugger like me." And it's true. It's so true.
You know, I think you don't want kids to suffer injuries or long-lasting damage
before they even get started in life.
Right, or before they have the choice to make that decision for themselves.
Yeah.
So I think
it's difficult. It's like a pillar of what of our society.
But that's the thing, like, you know, high school football, it was always a big part of America.
There's
you know?
nothing else, right? It's like high
so
school
I really don't know. I mean, the only thing I think you can do if you want to keep it in is just the more stringent rules.
Well, what they should do, they need to give them a lesson on rugby to show them how bad it could really be.
Well, rugby is, you're a different kind of guy when you play rugby. That's
no pads.
Yeah.
I mean, they all have cauliflower.
Yeah,
they're psychos.
Yeah,
those guys.
Tough sport. Tough sport.
I love that.
Rugby is a great sport, though.
Totally. You know? And America really never developed much of a.
No, I mean a lot of colleges play it. You know, I had my friend's brother was on the rugby team in college, but it was all based around drinking at the end of the game. They would get together. Yeah. But man, the stories that you hear about rugby, it's like, wow, man.
Yeah. It's so fascinating because I don't know anything about the sport.
Yeah.
But the ball's weird looking. Yeah. It's like, I don't know. It looks like a blimp.
Yeah. A lot of rugby players are coming to, not a lot, but there's some that come from Australia and they play American football, especially field goal kickers. I think
no kidding.
I think the Jets had one a few years back. Yeah. Yeah.
I like when they're like all huddled in the circle.
Yeah, scrum. It's like a scrum.
What are they doing? Are they just fighting for possession?
Well, yeah, that's what. Yeah, I think it's it's a rugby scrum. It's called.
Those are the toughest boys out there, man.
Yeah, tough sport. That is a tough sport, and you talk about violent collisions. I mean, that's that's why
I think there's like a compilation on YouTube somewhere of like funny collisions in rugby.
That's why there's
like savage.
Broken bones galore in that sport. And
but nothing. Mm-hmm. Nothing, in my opinion, is more. Dangerous than hockey because you're not moving at a human speed.
Right.
You're moving almost like at a supersonic freak speed on skates on the ice. These guys are clocking at 30 miles per hour.
There are some devastating injuries. I have to say, though, the worst injury I ever saw in hockey was when the guy's name was Clint Malarchuk, and any hockey fans that happen to see this will remember. Hockey fans of my age and older will remember this event. A guy was skating in. Clint Malarchuk was a goalie. I believe on the Quebec Nordiques back in the day.
Nordiques.
And the guy was skating in, and he got pushed or whatever, came up, and his skate blade cut his jugular.
Oh, my God.
And when you obviously cut a jugular vein, the bleeding that takes place is profuse, mixed with the ice, which is like a whitish clear color, and it just pooled up around him. That was probably the most brutal injury that I ever saw. There are some that are equally brutal. I almost just got
queasy thinking about that.
But that's what happened. And nowadays you see a lot of these neck guards, but the skate came under whatever protection he had, and it literally cut his jugular vein. So he, thank God, he lived. But
that is
man,
horrific.
And the news, like you're watching the news at night, and they're like, anybody who's queasy, you might want to turn away, but this is an injury suffered by this goalie. And it was oh my God, man.
What I really go for is hockey dad fights.
Yeah.
Those are the most sick ones that exist in the country. Yeah. I mean, like, there's so much. Remember if you, like, maybe 10, 15 years ago, like, I think one dad killed the other dad at like, a hockey game?
Yeah.
Psycho.
That's all sports. You get, because a lot of these guys live through their kids,
Yeah. It's not funny that someone did that, but it's like,
a lot of these guys want to, their career stalled for whatever sport they were into.
They peaked and then
they think their son is going to be the next Wayne Gretzky, and so they end up, every play is of like the utmost importance, and they get violent over it. There were guys when I was teaching. There was a guy who the district banned him from going to the games because he was just
it's too much.
Yeah. He ended up working for me when I opened my business.
That's embarrassing. Yeah. You get banned from a high school game.
Yeah. And I said, I got to mention this to you. Not that I personally care. I wasn't there or anything. And
well, what's up with that? Right.
What the heck possessed you to go that? And I remember, like, the security guards when I was teaching happened. I used to teach at night at the alternative school after the regular school day. So I became friendly with the security guard, and he said, this gentleman, I'm not going to bring his name up, man, I had to go to his house with a letter from the superintendent that said you're no longer allowed.
Right.
Or, and if you do show up, we'll have to call the police to remove you. And so of course, when I asked him, he went like right back into like the rant mode and
right. It took him right back.
He wasn't. He didn't learn his lesson. Man. I'll say that. So, that's how bad it could get. So,
oh Lord.
Yeah. So it can be dangerous. But, so, yeah, that was the high school sports and college sports, or even like the young, youth baseball and little league. And, I coached your brother in baseball. I saw a lot, coached you, your mother was a soccer coach for you one year.
I was the goalie, right?
Yeah.
That's what I did. Didn't do much.
No, but you were very young.
I was never really like an athletic guy.
You were very young in those days. But I was, my brother and I were pretty athletic, and we played a lot of sports as kids. But, some of these parents and, while I was teaching, other teachers I worked with that had coached were, just the horror stories. And I hear it. Like, I have friends now that I talk to in the gym, and, like, about their kids, like they really feel like their kid is going to be the next, believe me, if your kid's going to be that good.
Not good to put that kind of pressure on a little kid, by the way.
And I'm all for like doing, supporting your kid and doing things to, ensure him getting a head start on things and rooting him on. But like, you could see though, this guy's kid does not want it as much as the father does. He just doesn't have
which is a short tail sign. It's never going to work.
Yeah, so.
I mean, anything could happen, but it's like a 1 in a billion.
I don't know. So anything else you want to bring up for today's?
Sure, one thing, and it has nothing to do with sports.
No, go ahead.
So last night I was just like, I've watched the Alex Jones episode, Returns to Joe Rogan, like maybe once before, but I never looked at the views.
Yeah.
Well, that has like the most views.
No kidding.
Of any Joe Rogan video I've found yet. I thought that Mike Tyson had the number one.
Wow. Alex Jones.
There's 22 million on YouTube. It blew my mind. I was like, no kidding.
Yeah, he's
he's a divisive. He loves.
Well, that's what it is. I mean, he's
a guy. But people know him.
Yeah, people are watching that for the entertainment value. Yeah, that was why. You're just hoping this guy goes off and
God damn
yeah, has one of his diatribes.
Eddie Bravo, though, we've said this before. I mean, he is something about that guy is hysterical, and he's not a comedian. He's funny.
No, he's one of those guys that are just inadvertently funny.
He just can't help himself. He's just hysterical.
Yep.
And then when you watch when you watch Alex Jones and him like interact, it's like a real. I like when he's like egging him on. And he's like, "Do you really think that they're selling baby parts?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "God damn it, bro!"
Yeah.
Oh Lord. But yeah, I couldn't believe my eyes. I said, "Oh my God, 22 million." Mike Tyson, I think, has only like 16 million. I thought that was like number one. That or Edward Snowden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there are
But
some
Alex
episodes
Jones,
that have a lot, but I was
like,
shocked that it,
blows everyone
Wow.
out of the water.
Wow.
So I just figured I would bring that up. It's
Well,
been on
there
my
are
mind.
people that, some of his things are very good, and the problem is with the ones that aren't, he goes too far, just like that.
Right, but
Sandy
he's apologized. He's apologized
Yeah,
for that
I
so
mean,
many times, and
it's
like people need to understand. People say things that are emotional. People say things, and of course,
I think it was the actions of going and harassing some of the. It was too much, but.
Well, they're claiming that he was sending people to Connecticut to harass, but he didn't.
Yeah,
that was people taking it. This is what Alex Jones said.
Okay.
I don't know what's true, what's
Right.
not true. Again, I'm just a guy.
Sure.
But he didn't direct anyone to go there and harass these people. These were people who took that into their own hands based on what they saw on InfoWars.
Yeah.
So it's
he's
he's right about a lot of things, though. I'll tell you that.
He's doomed, though. You know what it is? As much viewership as he gains from his personality,
He's been
or
totally
as much
debunked.
as much as he's going to lose.
Yep.
That's the thing. He's doomed by his delivery. Because at the end of the day, he will always be put into the entertainment category,
right,
more
rather than
yeah,
reporting.
yeah. So,
and I guess we'll just we'll finish off on the RNC real quick.
Sure.
Because we certainly gave Joe Biden and Kamala Harris a lot of attention.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I just think that it was, first of all, edited way better.
Mm-hmm.
It felt
way better than last year's, or way better
than the DNC.
Okay.
The DNC was cringe. I mean, the Republican one had some characters who were a little
Sure,
like weird and as to be expected.
Yeah.
There's kooks on the right and there's kooks on the left,
Sure.
right? But I think Melania Trump delivered a great speech. I actually thought it was so good that I posted on Facebook. I said the First Lady made
no
great
plagiarism or stealing anybody's speech this year like they complained about last year.
She didn't put down anybody
Yeah.
on the opposite side.
Well, that's always,
It was classy.
Yeah.
And it was the higher road.
I like to see that when they just kind of, focus on your
It was
vision.
very,
and
very
yeah,
professional.
yeah.
There was a true agenda.
Yeah.
There was true solutions, unlike the other side.
Sure.
But there was no digs really thrown. I mean, it
well,
was
that's
just,
good to see.
It really
Yeah.
was. I enjoyed watching it. I watched it pretty much from beginning to end. And someone brought up a good point, like talking about the viewership, is that people on the right tend to watch what the right and left do.
Yes.
Whereas people on the left just view the left media, like the DNC,
Right.
and they won't even entertain turning on the RNC.
No,
So that
no.
explains a big part of the viewership differential.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good point. I think Tim Pool brought that up, and I said, "Wow, it's probably true." I never thought of that before, but so yeah, I thought it was good. I thought the
Well, I think that's like when they. Sorry to cut you off. I think that's just in general. I think that is a big issue. Is that that side of the table doesn't really want to even entertain the other side.
Correct.
Like, I'm willing to sit down
and learn, or
I
share ideas.
It's like, tell me why what I feel is wrong, and what you feel is like. I'm willing to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean I'm going to change my mind, but
I'm also not going to burn your house
right,
down.
But if I'm willing to listen, that means that there could be a chance that I'll change. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you got to at least be able to listen, and I just don't see any listening going on from the left. I just don't see it.
No, they think. Well, it's funny because what's happening right now is like amazing, and we could go into this for another hour. I'm going to try to make it brief. Donald Trump is the new age president, whereas Joe Biden, in actuality, is a representation of the old,
of the past
status quo.
Sure.
Donald Trump is the internet president.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really hard
Biden
pill.
is the lifetime politician. That's what he is.
He's the old status quo.
Yep.
And it's ironic because he's running on the platform of progressivism.
Yes.
But in fact, he's the most conservative you could probably get, and you don't even realize it.
Very interesting.
It is very.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's like their views are just all mixed up. Like,
Yeah.
they're always talking about the new, and then the guy they're going for is
the oldest freaking
guy that's been entrenched in Washington for 50 years. It's like,
well, they love the swamp monsters, man. I mean, like I don't know. I don't know why you would want a career politician that has had 40 plus years, to change things. And, I mean, he has no track record. I still can't find anything
As I said, I'm always
done.
willing to listen.
Right.
And I was a guy just never... I'll never talk politics or religion when I walk into a place or have it just.
But we sure will on a podcast.
Yeah, but this is the place. So
right.
But I'm always willing to entertain and listen to the other side. All 100%. I ask is that the same respect is granted our way. So one
thing I want to say is the Covington Catholic school student gave a little bit of a speech yesterday.
Okay.
The one that was almost like had his head cut off by Kathy Griffin.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I posted on it, I said, this kid looked great. Excellent speech. Kid's the future. You never know. He might have a career in politics.
Right.
I mean, he's a really trending person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And someone I don't even know, could have been anywhere in the world, wrote Hitler Youth.
Oh, it's
disgusting. Why do they have to say that?
Yeah.
They have no clue.
No.
I find if you say that to me, you are the biggest ignorant. I'm not even going to respond to you.
It's not even worth the...
It's,
no.
It's like, but whatever. That is what they always go for.
Yeah.
That is what our friend did on Facebook
it's
the other day.
low-hanging fruit. It's very easy to,
do us all a favor, read a book.
Yeah.
Educate yourself. And with that, we're going to leave you all off. Have a wonderful
day.
Yeah.